This was known for quite a while.
Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. Iran and the United States hold a third round of indirect nuclear talks in Geneva as Washington builds up forces in the Middle East. Both sides say they want diplomacy but warn they will respond if the other resorts to military action. Hong Kong media tycoon Jimmy Lai wins an appeal overturning his 2022 fraud conviction, with the court quashing the guilty verdict and sentence. The ruling comes days after he was jailed on separate national security charges and he remains in custody. Russia launches a wave of missile and drone attacks across Ukraine, wounding at least 8 people ahead of high-level talks between Kyiv and Washington to end the war. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko says the capital suffers damage to a residential building and multiple fires as the conflict enters its 5th year. Former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton are set to appear before the House Oversight Committee in its investigation into the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The depositions are scheduled to take place in Chappaqua, New York, where the couple reside. Cuba's Interior Ministry says Border Patrol forces engage in a shootout with a U.S. speedboat, killing 4 people. Authorities say the vessel carries a Florida license plate with the U.S. state located about 145 kilometers from the island. South Korea and the United Arab Emirates sign a defense cooperation MOU worth more than $35 billion, according to Seoul's presidential envoy. President Lee Jae-myung's chief of staff, Kang Hoon-sik, says the projects cover air defense as well as air force and naval capabilities. The USS Gerald R. Ford departs Crete after a supply stop as President Donald Trump sends the carrier strike group to the Middle East. The move comes amid a broader US military buildup as Washington weighs possible action against Iran. Russia questions how President Donald Trump's proposed Board of Peace would coexist with the United Nations Security Council, saying the UN remains the only recognized global authority on peace and security. Moscow raises concerns after Washington, the only permanent council member to join, says the body could expand beyond Gaza to address other global conflicts. We start this hour in Geneva, where the third round of nuclear talks between the United States and Iran is reportedly set to focus solely on Iran's nuclear program and the lifting of sanctions. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson has confirmed that Tehran will push for the lifting of sanctions while also asserting its right to peaceful nuclear energy use. Oman's foreign minister, Sayed Badr al-Sabdi, is in Geneva to mediate the crucial talks. Reports say that the head of the UN nuclear watchdog, Rafael Grossi, is also expected to join the ongoing negotiations. These talks come after a series of high-stakes diplomatic moves, including a major US military buildup in the region, and as US President Donald Trump continues to voice strong opposition to Iran's nuclear ambitions. In response, Iran's president has reiterated that the country is not seeking nuclear weapons and that its nuclear program is for civilian purposes only. Joining us to discuss the ongoing escalations between Tehran and Washington is Dr. Asta Chadha, an associate professor of international relations. He joins us from Ritsu Mikan University in Kyoto, Japan. Thank you so much, Dr. Chadha, for joining us in this discussion. And on a pressing issue, these third round of talks are kicking off today with the Iranian delegation certainly arriving in Geneva. They are there right now. We have yet to get news whether Jared Kushner and Witkoff are there. However, What is at stake today? We are seeing a huge build-up in the Middle East. If things go well, what can we expect? Another round of talks, more negotiations, and what's the worst case scenario at the end of today?
Yeah, thank you for having me on your channel to discuss this pertinent issue. I've been following this news, and as you mentioned, today's talks would pretty much decide the course of action for both sides, for the United States as well as for Iran. You asked me what is at stake. A lot. For Iran, the economy is in a very dire state. They definitely need this deal to go through. Look at the inflation rate in Iran, which is close to 60%. They are suffering from widespread civil unrest. Protests are occurring across more than 30 of its provinces. The administration has so far, I would say, failed to contain those protests. They have also failed to respond to people's demands. So reaching a deal for them is a matter not just of making sure that they maintain their economic security, but also important for them to be able to maintain the regime in itself. So too much is at stake for Iran here. For United States, on the other hand, I think we need to look at it specifically from President Trump and his administration's perspective. For them, being able to broker a deal, being able to put pressure on Iranian administration to promise to never build a nuclear program, to make sure that they never ever reattempt a re-establishment of this program in the future. The fact that US has a huge military buildup that you were earlier mentioning, including aircraft carrier strike groups, that itself raises the stakes of security in the region. Because and that was your second question, what would happen if this doesn't work out? I mean, if it doesn't work out, we could very much be on the cusp of seeing yet another conflict breaking out in the Middle East, which is why we see a lot of Middle Eastern players also interested in looking at or observing where this deal goes. On another note, just talking about it from a regional security perspective, this potential deal also has the capability of establishing sort of a template for a roadmap as to what kind of discussions can go on further, because this is neither the first time nor the last time any Middle Eastern power would want to develop nuclear capabilities or ballistic missile capabilities. So for United States to maintain its hegemony, for the bigger powers to ensure that there is no other nuclear power challenging that hegemony or challenging regional peace, the future of this deal pretty much will decide what path the regional security will take, specifically in the Middle East.
And briefly, Dr. Chadha, we are getting reports that the UN nuclear watchdog head, Rafael Grossi, will be at the talks as well. How and why is this individual important to these talks, and what's their relationship with Iran currently?
I mean, let's understand that Iran so far has promised, and that was the significance of the first two rounds that were held, first in Muscat and then in Geneva, that Iran had promised or kind of agreed to discuss halting its nuclear weapons program. But what they did not want to, or what they still do not want to discuss is, any concessions on its ballistic missiles program. And, in that sense, Iran is trying to walk a very fine line here by making sure that only an aspect of their national security or nuclear buildup is discussed, and not everything else is. So the presence of the nuclear watchdog is very important here, because it is very, very likely that they might want to actually bring to the table the discussion of the entire range of Iran's missile programs, which has been for United States a major sticking point for a very long time. And, to tell you the truth, it sounds to me like for President Trump and his administration, a win is not just a signed deal, but a win would really be to make sure that they can avoid yet another Middle Eastern war, while simultaneously allowing Iran, to take that step towards completely abandoning its nuclear ambitions. That would truly sound like a deal and a success. So probably the very fact that a lot of parties to this discussion, whether it's the United States, whether it's the nuclear watchdog, whether it's Muscat, they are gathering here because they do have hope that they probably might arrive at some sort of agreement.
Okay, we'll keep tabs on that. Dr. Chadha, do stay with us. We have another related development coming up. Reactions are coming in from around the world, and China is urging all parties to exercise restraint Amid escalating tensions involving Iran, the Chinese Foreign Ministry has stressed its commitment to political and diplomatic solutions, opposing the use or threat of force. Moreover, China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning has expressed support for Iran in maintaining national stability and legitimate rights. Let's in fact listen in to her statement.
我们正在密切关注伊朗局势的发展。中方一贯主张通过政治外交途径解决问题，反对在国际关系中使用或威胁使用武力。中国和伊朗两国人民传统友好，中方支持伊朗政府和人民维护国家稳定和正当权益，希望各方珍惜和平，保持克制，通过对话解决分歧。中方愿为此继续发挥负责任大国作用。
We now turn to Europe, where President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine has reported that Russia has launched a massive attack on Kyiv's energy infrastructure overnight, firing 420 drones and 39 missiles at critical facilities across 8 regions. The attack, which targeted gas infrastructure in Poltava and electricity substations in Kyiv and Dnipro, left dozens injured, including children. Many residential buildings were also struck, compounding the damage to civilian areas. The attack came after a call between Zelensky and US President Donald Trump ahead of peace talks in Geneva. Despite Ukraine's air defense systems intercepting most of the incoming missiles, several managed to strike their targets, underscoring the vulnerability of Ukraine's energy infrastructure. The Ukrainian president has expressed gratitude for international assistance, but warned that constant vigilance and aid are necessary to protect the country's energy grid. Zelensky's calls for continued support and preparedness come as Russia's efforts to cripple Ukraine's infrastructure continue, with energy systems being a primary focus of the assault. Dr. Chadha joins us once again to discuss Europe's defining crisis. Of course, the Ukrainians continue to suffer a bitter cold as Russia and Moscow aims for their infrastructure. But we have a meeting in Geneva coming up, a bilateral meeting between the United States and Ukraine. The Trump administration, where do you think it currently stands? We've obviously seen a real flip-flapping over Donald Trump's tenure, his second time in the White House. Going into these talks, should Ukrainians feel positive or otherwise?
Right, a very important question you asked there. I mean, let's look at the scenario of this conflict. It doesn't look very likely that either of the parties are going to walk away, despite if the peace talks were to be successful, with too much of a win. They're already losing a lot. Russia seems to be, on the front foot here, trying to attack the gas and energy infrastructures in Ukraine, possibly to make not just small territorial gains. They are not too large, but seems like they do want to have a leverage when the final discussion takes place in Geneva, when there is, and in fact, a three-way summit, which, according to Trump administration, would be there, the way they would want to conduct these talks, to have Russia and Ukraine sitting side by side and becoming parties to the very talks for ending the war that they're both engaged in. And Russia seems to be here trying to weaponize winters in some way, expose the critical and the serious nature of these critical infrastructure in Ukraine. The fact that Ukraine stands very, very vulnerable, the fact that they are trying to build this leverage by using this battlefield pressure against Ukraine, and the fact that Russia seems to be wanting to force Ukraine to divert its pressure, air defense and financial resources away from the front lines, because now they have to repair civilian grids. They'll have to go and repair the gas infrastructure that is being destroyed. And then I'm not even talking about the huge economic cost and the cost of reconstruction that would need to be undertaken by someone. So what is Ukraine fighting for here, apart from its sovereignty? Also fighting for its security guarantee, something that allows it to make sure and ensure that Russia would not attempt to violate yet another ceasefire in any way. So, I mean, what is the possibility that the US could in some way be able to, what is US planning to do in this case, I suppose, is by bringing both these parties. It's very obvious that Russia has built this leverage through battlefield pressure, but the idea would be to make sure that this conflict stops as soon as possible. Yes, would Ukraine have to possibly give up some of its territory? I mean, following up from the previous talks and the way they have progressed, it's highly likely that Ukraine might be asked to allow some of those captured territories to work as the buffer, rather than Russia being coerced in some way to give up those territories that it has gained as a result of this conflict. I mean, again, overall, the scenario does not sound very positive, but Trump administration seems to be pushing very hard for this settlement. But I think the true end of this war would depend largely on what sort of security guarantees can US and Europeans give to Ukraine in the long run, because a short-term deal or a short-term peace does not guarantee that this war cannot break out again. So that too much is at stake, I would say, in Ukraine.
Dr. Chatter, thank you so much for taking the time in speaking to us. Always a great pleasure to get your input on these issues. We'll of course continue to cover those talks in Geneva as they progress, but we move on to some related news. According to reports, Russia has handed Ukraine the bodies of 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers in exchange for 35 Russian soldiers' remains. This exchange is part of a series of periodic body transfers between the two nations, which have been taking place throughout the ongoing conflict. The announcement came on February the 26th, as the war marked its 4th anniversary. The exchange reflects the ongoing efforts to address the tragic losses on both sides, even amid continued hostilities. Russia and Ukraine have previously exchanged bodies of war dead, and this latest handover further highlights the human cost of ongoing conflict. Both nations remain deeply entrenched in the war, with the recent transfer underlining the brutality faced by their armed forces. Now we turn over to Asia's east, where German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has stated that he has discussed ending the Russia-Ukraine war with the Chinese President Xi Jinping during his state visit to China. He has added that he hoped that Xi understood the importance of ending the war. Meanwhile, on the second day of his visit, Merz has toured the Forbidden City in Beijing. Merz has also been given a test drive on a Mercedes-Benz's new S-Class by Sedan, the car maker of CEO Ola Kalaneus. Merz and Kalaneus spoke briefly inside the new vehicle before the German Chancellor gave a brief speech at a hotel near Beijing's capital international airport. His trip has shown that bilateral exchange and cultivating ties are seen as a high priority in Berlin, a spokesperson for the German carmaker said, adding that personal contacts with China are important for preserving economic ties. Merz has called for partnership and dialogue with China, aimed at resetting relations that have been clouded by yawning trade deficit with the world's second largest economy. The German Chancellor will depart for Hangzhou in the eastern province later to continue his first visit to China. Joining us now to discuss this is Alison Mutler, the former Associated Press Bureau Chief. She joins us live from Spain. Alison, thank you so much for taking the time. Of course, Germany, Europe's largest economy, meeting the largest economy in Asia, the second largest in the world. What does Merz want from this visit? Apologies, Alison. I think you might be on mute. Okay, we are.
Here we are. Yeah,
Brilliant.
yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, Thomas. As you said, the visit is twofold. It's very important for Germany, which is Europe's biggest economy, to have good relations with China, the world's second biggest economy. As you said, the relations have been clouded of late. And Germany, I think, would like to reset it, particularly as a geopolitical force is moving eastward, the United States is becoming more of an unreliable partner. It's still an important partner, but Europe needs to find more markets in the east, and China is huge. The EU already has a new trade agreement with India, another huge market. So I think it's very important, particularly as this is this yawning trade deficit. China exports much more to the EU than the other way around, and that doesn't make Germany or any of the other European countries that happy. So I think his presence there is sent a message. We consider you important. He's not just sort of flying into Beijing and flying out. He's going to other places too tomorrow, and it's the first visit, I think, by him as when he was Chancellor. And the other reason he's there, which is equally important for Europe, is security. Security in the sense of the Ukraine-Russia war, which is now gone into its fifth year. Now, we all know that China is a senior partner to Russia, so it has leverage over the Kremlin, and Europe is very worried about this war going on, but not just that, potential future aggression by Russia. We're hearing warnings that we are no longer, as Mayor said last year, we are no longer at peace with Russia. We hear warnings from various generals in Europe, including in the United Kingdom, that war with Russia is almost inevitability, we're told, in a few years' time. So I think that Merz wants to speak seriously to the senior partner with Russia to say these are our concerns and we believe that you have influence and you can help. So it's a very big diplomatic visit, and it's twofold. It's economic, it's trade, but it's also security.
And this, of course, follows a flurry of Western leaders that have visited China over the past few months. We've seen Keir Starmer, Mark Carney, of course. We have Donald Trump set to visit in April. What does this mean for the West and balancing that relationship when it comes to China, which, of course, is a manufacturing and economic superpower with, of course, the possibility of it being a national security threat at the same time?
Well, I think Western leaders here, you spoke about Canada, Britain, and now Germany, want to play carefully with China. China is a different kind of player than Russia, for example. But they want to, if you like, keep on their good side and keep up relationships, not ignore them, give them the attention that they think that they would appreciate. I think, I'm sure Beijing appreciates all these high-level visits. And as I said, it's both things. It's firstly because of the economy, because a lot of the Western economies are dependent on, if you like, cheap China imports, but also the security, because China has a different way of going about these things. It's not like Russia. It wants to create influence in certain regions, and it's managed, for example, in Europe to some extent, and or particularly in the Balkans, in Africa. So I think Europe doesn't want to, and the West doesn't want to lose out, and it wants to make sure it has good relations with China, because it is the world's second largest economy, and it is growing in terms of geopolitics and strategy. So I think Europe wants to be there when things change, and to have at least a working relationship, and certainly not a hostile relationship with Beijing.
Alison Mutler, thank you so much. Do stay with us as we turn over to the United States for our next story, where the Federal Bureau has fired at least half of a dozen agents linked to a probe in 2022 into the US President Donald Trump retaining documents at his Mar-a-Lago residence. American media has reported yesterday, drawing anger from the association representing personnel of the US Investigatory Bureau. The FBI raided Trump's residence in Florida in 2022 when he was out of office as part of a now dropped investigation into the mishandling of classified documents after his first White House term. According to reports, FBI Director Kash Patel has ordered the firing of at least 6 agents over their work on the case. Alison Mutler joins us once again. Critics here say that Donald Trump is punishing his political opponents. These individuals who search his Mar-a-Lago residence during the time when Joe Biden was in office. Do you see Donald Trump as doing that? Do you think that's an accurate statement?
Well, it does very much look like that. We know that Donald Trump didn't accept the outcome of the 2020 election, and that I remember there were reports at the time that he'd taken documents from the FBI that he wasn't entitled to, so that a search was carried out. And it does look like, without knowing all the ins and outs, it does look very much that it's political payback time. And the head of the FBI realizes that Donald Trump is president and therefore has fired these six agents. So to me, it does look political. I don't know. Why is it happening now? Why didn't it happen if they did it in 2022? If there was a suspicion of wrongdoing, why weren't they investigated far earlier? It's 4 hours later. So it really does. The optics, it looks very political. It looks like political payback from Donald Trump.
Yes, Alison Mutler, thank you so much for taking the time in joining us. Always a great pleasure to have you here on the broadcast. We now stay in Europe for our next story, and Spain's new migrant legalization plan aiming to grant legal status to at least 500,000 undocumented migrants is facing growing uncertainty and strain on immigration services. The program, set to run from April to June, has created long queues outside consulates and immigration offices as migrants scramble to gather the necessary documentation. However, confusion over specific requirements and a lack of additional resources or staffing have left many applicants anxious. Migrants who have been in Spain for at least 5 months or who applied for asylum before the end of 2025 can apply, but the final details remain unclear. Concerns are rising over the ability of Spain's overwhelming immigration system to process such a large number of applications. Unions warn of potential chaos without more support, as the lack of clarity has also fueled an illegal market for appointment slots and paid services. Let's take a listen in.
Oui, souvent j'ai peur. Souvent j'ai peur quand je vois souvent les policiers ou bien je descends du terrain, je vis le contrôle, souvent j'ai peur. Parce que ici, sans papier, c'est un peu dangereux. Ça va aider beaucoup de personnes. Comme exemple, moi, je suis là depuis 2023. Je n'ai pas encore de résidence. J'avais permission de travail pour un peu de temps. Mais d'ici quelques mois, ça finit. Après, si je n'ai pas de résidence, je ne vais pas travailler. La vie ici, ça sera difficile.
A 14-year-old Palestinian boy, Jad Jadala, was shot dead by Israeli soldiers last November in the West Bank. He lay untreated for over 30 minutes as soldiers blocked ambulances from reaching him. Despite claims by the IDF of providing initial medical treatment, witnesses and paramedics deny this. Jad's family accuses the soldiers of planting a rock next to him to frame him. His body is yet to be returned and the cause of his death remains unclear. According to a Bloomberg report, Apple is in talks with several Indian banks to launch its Apple Pay service in India. The banks reportedly include ICICI Bank, HDFC Bank and Axis Bank, along with other global card networks. Apple's aim is to introduce the service around the middle of 2026. However, this report has not been verified by independent parties yet, and we are still expecting major details to be disclosed in the coming days. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.